Okay, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Allah bless you all. Okay, let's start our Q&A today. Al-Fatiha. Bismillah. Alhamdulillah. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد صلاة تفرحه وتسعده وترضيه واجزه بها عنا ما هو أهله يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم زدنا ولا تنقصنا وأكرمنا ولا تهنا وأعطنا ولا تحرمنا وآثرنا ولا تؤثر علينا وأرضنا وارض عنا يا كريم. Okay, Alhamdulillah. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to you all. Allah bless you all. Already some good questions. Right, let me answer the questions we have and then I'll come to yours. So type away and we'll try and cover what we can. Okay, so the first one we have today. What should I do if my husband has left Islam after converting? Wow. So this is a very difficult situation for anyone who's tested with it. Clearly, there's always going to be feelings. Generally, people feel affection for their spouses, and it is going to be a painful situation. So the general rule is in a non-Muslim land, one that's not governed by Muslims and the courts don't run by the rules of the Sharia, is the husband and wife remain married for the duration of 3 of her menstrual cycles. And in this time, she should speak to him, she should get others to speak to him. Try and ask him why. Islam obviously made sense to him at one point, and he saw the beauty of it, that's why he accepted it. And for someone to leave, usually when people leave, it's usually a combination of not understanding Islam and then other sources of trauma, and them affecting a person's understanding. Sometimes people blame God, or sometimes, let's say someone who's been through a difficult domestic situation. Let's say there's been domestic violence or something like that, and people end up either blaming Islam, or if they've had difficult circumstances because of a particular culture that identifies as being Islamic, and they confuse Islam with the culture. People can generally, they experience doubts, or they decide, well, this isn't for me. And so in this time of the 3 menstrual cycles, the lady should speak to him and get people to speak to him, and you just generally get him to express what his qualms are, and then have that explained to him. Islam in and of itself, inherently, it's right, it's correct, and it makes sense. And people don't have to, yes, there are things beyond what the mind can comprehend. You tell anyone to describe to you, you tell anyone to visualize the speed of light, something moving that fast, or visualize the distance between the sun and the earth, the 93 million miles, and the light takes from the sun, the sunlight takes about 8 minutes to get to earth. Just visualize 93 million miles. You can't visualize the solar system's diameter. Visualize the closeness of Proxima Centauri, the closest star, and the mind shuts off. So there are things like someone understanding the Isra and the Mi'raj. We say, look, it's within the realm of possibility. If it wasn't possible, like 2 + 2 = 9, or drawing a square circle, those things are not rationally possible. It's just so you can't claim that you've drawn a square circle, or you had 2 sweets and another 2 sweets, and you ended up having 9 sweets, right? So, but the Isra and the Mi'raj, or someone traveling such great distances, in part of a night, it is possible. I mean, don't people imagine wormholes and these sorts of things? So Allah, who can do anything, can make that happen. So it's not inherently impossible. So Islam makes sense. So these things should be explained to the person, and ultimately it's dua and asking the person to come back to the truth. But if he doesn't, then at the conclusion of her third period, her third menstrual cycle, after his ridda, after him leaving Islam, then their marriage is over. And and what the deen looks at here, what Islam looks at here, is her well-being. They may love each other, and perfectly understandable. There may be children in the marriage, perfectly understandable. But the harm that would come to a person living with someone who has animosity towards the deen, it's going to be an impossible situation if someone, let's say, was a Muslim and then they left, for them to just be neutral about it and just to not have any sort of critical words. That's never going to happen. And vegans who start eating meat start criticizing other vegans, vice versa. So it's going to be like that. So it would lead to harm to the wife. It would lead to harm to the children. And unfortunately, the highest level of harm and the worst level of harm is a person's iman being lost, their faith being affected. So in this situation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us a ruling that this marriage will be ended, looking at the well-being, the long-term overall well-being of the remnant people, the family members. Now, as I said, it can be very difficult. Sometimes people find it hard. They fall in love with a non-Muslim, and then they find it difficult when they say that the Sharia forbids marriage to them. But they don't see that, okay, you may feel for this person, but how many times has a person been led into a situation that's bad for them because of their feelings, or to remain in a situation because of their feelings? So your feelings are not the barometer of what's good for you and bad for you in the long term. They may bring short-term pleasure or pain, from being separated from someone, for example, or being with someone, but it's not the deciding factor. And our Creator, who knows what's best for us, has given us the rulings of the Sharia for our benefit, not his. Nothing can benefit him. He's perfect already, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in this situation, she would have to separate from him. And it's understandable that it's likely to be a painful situation. But imagine, it must be very difficult for people who have non-Muslim relatives, especially those who die without embracing Islam. I mean, because where are they going to go in the Akhirah? They've rejected their Creator, and they have to answer for that. And where are they going to go in the Akhirah? That must be painful enough. And imagine losing one person to that in your life, and then if someone was to stay with such a person, living that life would erode her iman. It would erode it completely, and to the point where people who were once religious could end up becoming people, a'udhu billah, Allah protect us, but could end up becoming people who just couldn't care less. And the children have parents have a duty of care to the children, and this duty of care also extends to their spiritual well-being, their well-being in the Akhirah. And a parent who's like a father, or the husband who's left Islam, if there's children there, what image is he going to paint of Islam to the children? And so before people think Islam splits up families or anything like this, no, look at the long-term well-being of people. If you're just thinking about this life and the 50, 60, 70, 80 years people live here, that's one thing. But the matter doesn't end there, does it? It continues into the Akhirah. So it would be advisable for her to go speak to, say, a local scholar and family, and the close community that she feels she can share with, and to get some support. It's not going to be an easy situation, and someone like this doesn't have to deal with it alone. Rather, having people around you is very important at this time. But to see the wisdom of this is also quite important. You don't want it affecting you to the point where your faith is influenced and negatively. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for well-being in our deen, our dunya, our akhirah, our iman, and our practice, and afia and protection in all. Ameen ya Rabb. Okay. What should I do if I mistakenly pray 2 rak'ahs fard instead of 4? So in this situation, imagine if there's a scenario where you're doing it at home or in a mosque. So instead of praying 4, you prayed 2. You're praying dhuhr, you prayed 2. If you realized whilst you're in the prayer, just get up and then do the other 2, do the sajda to sahu, and finish the prayer off as normal after that, you'll be okay. I'm going to talk about the sajda to sahu shortly. Let's say you're praying at home and you've said your salams and you sat there and you realize, oh no, I only prayed 2 and not 4. So, provided you haven't spoken to anyone, dhikr is okay, like astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah, la ilaha illallah, because you do that in the prayer as well. So, provided there's been no speech, you haven't spoken to anyone, and 2, the second condition is that you haven't turned your chest away from the qibla, like you moved elsewhere, you turned around or something. As long as you haven't done these 2 things, you can stand up and go straight, hold your hands and as though you went into the 3rd rak'ah and pray the 3rd, pray the 4th, and finish off with the sajda to sahu. This is if you're at home and you haven't spoken to anyone and you haven't turned your chest away from the qibla. If it's someone who's in a mosque and not necessarily praying behind the imam, but you're in a mosque, a place specifically made, and designated for the prayer. So you're in a mosque, and provided you haven't spoken to anyone, you can get up and you can finish your prayer, do the 3rd and the 4th rak'ah, and done. The mosque is different to the home, because in the mosque, if you get up and you walk elsewhere, even if you move your chest away from the qibla, you can stop where you are, face the qibla, and continue, as long as you haven't spoken to anyone. So that's the distinction, and that's how you deal with it if you realize you've only done 2 out of a 4-unit prayer, or 3, or 1 out of a 2, 3, or 4-unit prayer. Okay, right. Let's see what else we have. When should sujood sahu be performed, and how is it done? This is almost like a tongue twister. Should sujood sahu. Okay, so sahu is being forgetfulness. You're forgetting something that you should be aware of. So this is usually regarding the units of the prayer or something done. So first of all, how to do a sajda to sahu or sujood sahu? You recite the tashahhud, at-tahiyyatu lillahi wa salawatu tayyibat, until you get to the shahada, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Then you say 1 salam to the right, and then you do 2 sajdas. And then when you get up, you finish off as normal. At-tahiyyat, the salah on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the dua, and then 2 salams, 1 to the right, 1 to the left. That's how it's done, and it's not much more complicated than that. So when do you have to do a sajda to sahu or sujood sahu? So it's basically done if you miss a wajib, or you delay a wajib, or you do one before its time. That's generally when it's done. I'm going to talk about the wajibat, so don't worry about that. But it's usually in those situations. This is if it's accidentally. If you deliberately miss a wajib or delay or these sorts of things, then you have to repeat the prayer. It's like a strong, it's like a punishment for not showing the prayer the reverence it deserves. So someone deliberately starts the prayer, Allahu Akbar, and then doesn't recite the Fatiha deliberately, then, it deserves reverence. Don't do that. So in that situation, you have to repeat the prayer. But if you miss a wajib, or you do it before its time, or you do it after its time, then you have to repeat. Then you have to do a sajda to sahu. Right. So let's look at the wajibat of the prayer. And these are covered in many books. And I do say, study fiqh, because fiqh is empowering. And this is quite a long list, actually. But let's look at some of the things. I won't go into detail in explaining them, but what is wajib in the prayer? Allah. So the recitation of the Fatiha fully. From Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen to Waladdaleen is wajib. Adding a surah after in the fard prayer, in the first two units, adding a surah or three short verses or one verse equivalent to the length of three short verses has to be recited. Okay. Reciting the Fatiha in the first two units is also a wajib in the fard. So in the fard you have three, sometimes on 4 units. You can't just be silent in the first two or recite something else and then only do the Fatiha in the third and fourth. The prayer would be valid. That's another discussion, but it has to be done in the first two. So any of these things that are missed out or contravened, Sajdatul Sahu. You have to recite the Fatiha first and then the surah. You can't say Qul Huwallahu Ahad, do that surah and then the Fatiha. Right? You have to have 2 sajdas for every unit. So Fajr, there are 2 units, so 2 for each, so 4 sajdas. And if you were to, so Dhuhr, 4 units, 8 sajdas. So each unit 2 sajdas. If you miss a sajda in a unit, like in Dhuhr, in the first unit you only do 1 sajda, then you have to make it up. So in the second one, you do 3, or you do 3 in the third or the fourth, but you make up that missed one, and then a sajda to sahu to compensate for the deficiency. Okay. You have to have the qira'ah of the Quran when you're standing up in the qiyam before the ruku'. So you can't go into ruku', get up, and then recite some Quran and then go into sajda. No, it has to be before. Another wajib is the bone of the nose and also the forehead. But the bone of the nose, the hard part of the bone of the nose, has to go onto the ground when you're in sajda. So the bone has to be touching. So if you're wearing glasses and the glasses are going to prevent you, you have to take them off. But the bone, so you can't just do a sajda by putting your forehead. The wajib is you have to have your bone touching. Yeah. Another wajib is that the majority of the forehead needs to be on the ground when doing the sajda. So if I was to lower my hat like this, I've covered it, and technically it'll be valid, but it's deficient. So sajda to sahu. If I did it deliberate, there'd be a problem. If I had my hat this low, so some of it is touching, that's not most of it, right? So the majority of the forehead has to be touching as best one can with the nose. Another thing is that the hands need to be on the knees when a person goes into ruku'. That's also wajib. Another wajib is you have to be completely still, even if it's for a second, in your ruku', your qiyam, in your ruku', your qiyam, and in your sajdas. And every position of the prayer, you have to come to a stop. So you can't go into a sajda like you're pecking. Like in the hadith, it's described as certain people where they rush the prayer, so it's like a chicken pecking. So go into sajda, stay there at least for a second, and then get back up. The first sitting in a 3 or 4 unit prayer is wajib. It becomes fard in Fajr, for example. If it's a 2 unit prayer, it becomes fard. But if it's a 3 or 4, then the first sitting is wajib, and the last one is a rukn, right, a fard. Okay, it's also wajib to sit. Well, technically, it's fard because that becomes the last sitting after the sajda to sahu. You have to sit there. Some of the ulama have said it's wajib, but it's a fard. You have to say the tashahhud in the first sitting, whenever that is. So the first sitting, or if there's only one sitting, you have to say the words of the tashahhud. At-tahiyyatu lillahi was-salawatu wat-tayyibat, until the end that you know. 2 salams at the end. The first one takes you out of the prayer, unless you're doing a sajda to sahu, but 2 salams at the end. In the witr prayer, reading a dua. So the qunut that we learn, Allahumma inna nasta'inuka wa nastaghfiruka wa nu'minu bika, that's great if you know that, but you can recite any dua. اللهم اهدنا فيمن هديت or ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. So a dua. Also the takbir, when you raise your hands in the witr after in the third unit, you recite the Fatiha, a surah, and then the takbir, and when you raise your hands, that is also wajib according to some scholars. Okay, starting the prayer with the words Allahu Akbar, and you don't use any other form of dhikr, not La ilaha illallah or Ar-Rahmanu Akbar. It's the wording we learned from the Prophet was Allahu Akbar. The 6 extra takbirat of the Eid prayers, they are wajibah. So if you miss them, you have to, the Imam would have to do the sajda to sahu. Although he's usually recommended to skip it. And the takbirah, normally the saying the takbir is a sunnah, but in the Eid prayer, because he does the 3 takbirs after the Quranic recitation, so he does a 4th one, that's wajib to go into ruku'. And and if you're reciting, if the Imam is reciting in Fajr, Maghrib and Isha and the Juma and the Eid prayers, even if it's a qada, and the Taraweeh and the Witr, if you're praying Witr in a group, then the Imam has to recite out loud enough for him and someone else to hear. But all the other prayers he whispers, and if you're praying by yourself, the same rules apply to those prayers. You can recite out loud or quietly. Nafil prayers, sunnah prayers, quietly. The sunnah of the daytime, quiet. Nighttime, you can raise your voice. Yeah, so I just talked about that. And they're most of the wajibats, right? And so if you contravene any of this, you'll have been skipping a wajib. Or another one is in the 3rd unit. Another wajib actually is, but you don't do anything to compensate with this, but you have to follow the Imam immediately. Sometimes with people, the Imam will say Sami Allahu liman hamida, and the guy is like really casually saying, no, I want to say all 3 of the tasbihat, Subhana Rabbi al-Azim, Subhana Rabbi al. Look, he's gone, but they still say, no, mutaba'atul Imam. You follow the Imam. When he moves, you move. There's only one exception, which is like in a 3 or 4 unit prayer. The tashahud is wajib to say fully, and getting up to follow him is also wajib. So there's like an opposition between these two. So you can choose either skip the rest of the tashahud and get up, or just follow him. Or just finish off the tashahud. So, but that covers the one. So that covers that scenario, and then you just do a sajda to sahu as I mentioned, and done. All right. Is it better to pray in a congregation or not in a public setting? This would depend. If there's a concern for your safety or your well-being, you could be attacked or something like this, or your property could be taken, and pray individually. Or pray. Some people pray in a group and others keep watch or something. But if that's not a concern, and and you won't be disturbing anyone or causing a nuisance for anyone, like praying in a path, blocking people off, or praying in an aisle on the plane when people need to get past and something. If you're not doing anything like that, then well, in a plane like that would be difficult to pray in a group. But anyway, so it's makruh to pray in a pathway, or in a road or something that people are walking by. Then pray as a group. Say we're believers. There's nothing. It's nothing to be ashamed of. I mean, if someone doesn't like it, then aren't they all about inclusivity? So include us in the group of people who you offer that respect to, and don't just keep it to yourself. So praying in a group is a powerful thing. People see Muslims who are praying in groups, and it moves them. Honestly, it moves them and it affects them. So it's better to pray in a group, unless, like I said, your well-being or your safety, it could be compromise, but otherwise pray in a group. That's always the best solution. But if it's going to entail you causing a nuisance or harm to someone, pray alone. There's no point asserting your Islamic identity with a very negative action that's just going to put people off Islam. So don't do that. And being considerate is a very important aspect of the deen, right? The Sunnah teaches us to consider people and with our words and our actions. So this will be part of it, and Allah knows best. All right. We did not. Are all forms of gambling prohibited? Okay. Yes. All forms of gambling are prohibited. Gambling, what does that entail then? So gambling entails paying for something that you're not certain you'll get. So you go to the fairground and say, right, you pay money to get a shot to shoot a balloon, and you'll get a teddy for it or something. Or into the machine where the claw goes down and maybe it'll grab something. They're all rigged anyway, right? I bet. No one's gonna design something that will easily pick up something because customers won't buy it off them. So that is considered gambling, where darbatu qanis, as they say, like you pay a fisherman here, I'll pay you £10, throw your net into the water, and anything that comes out, he says, you can have. No, because there's no guarantee. So in trade, in buying and selling, there has to be a guaranteed product at the end of it. There's another type of, sometimes people bet, like people play a snooker game, in some snooker centers. What they'll do, they'll have, the way it's done is like they go by lights. So, they'll have a machine where you slot in some money and it will keep the light on. Like you'll have a fixed time, or there'll be a meter running and then you go. So they have a bet where they'll say the loser pays, or the loser will buy us a meal. This is gambling, right? This is also this type of betting that's classed as gambling. A one-way bet like this is valid. What do I mean one way? So it's like if you go with your friend to play snooker, for example, and you say, if I lose, I will pay. I'll buy you a meal, and that's it. If he loses, no consequences, because that's not a two-way gamble. Then that's just you promising something from your side, and he doesn't have to. He's not risking anything, and so it's just you're saying, in this eventuality, I will pay. So a one-way bet like that is valid, but not you bet and then there's a consequence if you lose, and he bets and there's a consequence if he loses. That's gambling. So this is basically it. All right, a couple more. Is it permissible to share one's sins for the sake of support? If there is a requirement, if there's a need for this, it would be permissible. Like someone's got an alcohol addiction, or someone's got a drug addiction, or anything else. If he's required to disclose something like this, either for therapy or for some other means to help him, get rid of this, and yes, in some situations, it would be wajib. If it's a means for him to stop the sin altogether and stop continuing with it, it's fine. But as for someone, in a haram relationship, someone's boyfriend has been, ghosting her for the last few days, and then can she go and tell someone, oh, my boyfriend, we haven't met up and he's not talking to me, this sort of thing, or him saying, oh, my girlfriend, she's broke up with me, and I want to get back with something like that? No, right? Because you're disclosing your sins. It shouldn't be getting done in the first place. and then B, going and telling, exposing yourself, exposing other people for support to deal with the a short-term issue just so you can go back to the sin. No, that's just wrong, right? That's just wrong. So you can't disclose your sin in that situation. Sometimes people ask about, if they're getting therapy, can they expose their or someone else's actions? In those situations, if you can keep it as vague as possible, especially if it's regarding someone else, great. But if you need to discuss it, then, or if you need to, remove, someone's harming you or harming another person close to you, then, like, someone comes home and he hears the neighbor, beating his wife or something. You don't say, oh well, it's not my business. No, you call the police, right? So a situation like this, if it's there and it's a means of removing harm, then yes, but only to the degree required, and Allah knows best. All right, one more. Let me look at your questions. What should be done if someone without proper Islamic knowledge speaks on religious matters? Allah, you let them speak and you walk off. There's it's a disease. Sometimes people just want attention, and they want to be validated. They want to feel like they're important. تلك الدار الآخرة نجعلها للذين لا يريدون علوا في الأرض ولا فسادا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, that tremendous lofty abode, home of the Akhirah, we make it for those who don't want dominance in the land. Ulu, literally to be over others. So either dominating or just a position of power, you could also understand it as. Wala fasada, nor to cause corruption or harm or destruction. And this is a very important point. So a desire to speak about, say, religious topics where people are going to come and start, paying attention, it can be a disease, and it can be, a problem. We know the hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari that one of the first three people who will be asked and questioned on the Day of Judgment will be the insincere scholar. Someone who speaks about the deen but without sincerity, just wanting, or a qari in the hadith is about someone reciting the Quran, but then that was synonymous with a scholar early on. So someone who speaks about the deen, if they're qualified, they speak about the deen on the basis that it's a responsibility. It's a responsibility. Allah has honored them with that knowledge that they require to save themselves from the hellfire and to obey Allah and serve Him. And it's a requirement that others have, in order for them to save themselves from the hellfire and serve their Lord. So someone like this who's qualified, and when they speak, there's a weight in their own mind and their own perception. So there's a responsibility. And like, for example, when you look in the books of Fatawa, and if you look in when what a person has to study to answer questions, like, there's a narration where one of the ulama said that Sayyidina Umar, for certain questions, he would gather all of the people who attended Badr, like the earliest Muslims. What's your opinion on this? And then there's people who just, something just as serious, they'll just throw out an answer without even being qualified for it. ومن قال في القرآن برأيه فليتبوأ مقعده من النار. Hadith in the Jami of Imam al-Tirmidhi. Whoever interprets the Quran out of his own opinion, unqualified opinion, then let him take his seat in the hellfire. We see it all the time. Someone casually saying, well, this verse means this. Do you know what you've just done? Do you know the weight and scope of what you've done? And most of the time they don't care. And we also see, people who haven't studied with the ulama, haven't got a standard of understanding the deen, interpreting the deen, using well authenticated, established works by scholars who have been authenticated and approved of by their peers, their contemporaries, those after them, their teachers, in the whole succession of an entire system. These people might have read a few articles here, gone and clicked on something here. We know Islam, and they talk about it. And the first thing you notice from them is a lack of nuance. Everything is black and white. No, everything isn't black and white. And they want to give a black and white answer here, and they want to give a black and white answer there. Why did the Sahaba differ over the rulings of the deen? They were all Arabs. Why did they, differ over? Why did the ulama differ? Okay, how much of the head do you have to wipe in wudu? Why are there something like 4 or 5 positions on this? Is this classed as wiping the wudu, your head? Just with your hand there, or do you have to do the whole, or is it just touching? There are positions regarding this. So one thing they lack is nuance, and nuance in understanding. Not everything is black and white. Even sometimes someone who posits a position that's not a mainstream position, as a person, as a faqih, he won't automatically dismiss it, because there may be some aspect of validity to it. If he is going to dismiss it, it's only based on proof. So, someone just hears a position that just, that's wrong. No, so someone who's speaking about the deen without being qualified for it, they're harming you and they're harming themselves. And this is rife in our times. And then what they'll do, they'll undermine it if you say, look, you're being, showing, you're being like this, or, you're backbiting this person, or you're speaking where you're not qualified. And they'll just have a mocking tone, a mocking attitude. And go read Ihya Ulumuddin, go read what Imam al-Ghazali says, and then just compare it to their actions and how they respond, and the whole subculture around it of just rudeness, having a bad opinion of people, bad akhlaq, just arguing with people constantly. This isn't deen. This isn't deen. Innama, the Prophet said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, innama bu'ithtu li'utammima makarim al-akhlaq in the Muwatta of Imam Malik, or salih al-akhlaq in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad radiyallahu anhuma. This is deen. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam coming and teaching us how to have the best relationship with Allah and the best relationship with people. And if you're an argumentative person and you just go around picking fights and arguing, and your life's a constant stream of rebuttal and criticism, you've got a major aspect of your deen missing. And quite frankly, someone like that doesn't deserve to be listened to. You can say whatever position you want, but are you actually helping people in their relationship with God? No. Oh, we're just showing what's true. Okay, show what's true by teaching what's right, and then living it, and learning, with someone who's qualified to teach you something, and learning to a standard where you are able to see the weight of what you're saying, and then do it. But otherwise, if it's it's what they like on YouTube, they have these things in it, like clickbait. They'll have a title, some guy with a funny type of image, and like, oh, you won't believe, or rage bait, right, where someone picks a fight with another person, and that's it. So is this deen? Is this what the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam faced difficulties for in Mecca for 13 years, and then for another 10 years in Medina? Is this why the Sahaba were tortured? So these people could just go casually say whatever they want about the deen? We know why, because it's my opinion. I read it, I read it on a tweet somewhere. That's not deen. So someone like that, someone who talks, who's not qualified, who hasn't had, years of training, because it's not just training of, how to understand a fiqh book or an aqidah book or a this position and that position. Some of these things can be understood, but as they say, like, وَلَلْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ لَكَ مِنَ الْأُولَى. Like a faqih is someone who knows that the akhirah is more important. And having يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعُ مَالٌ وَلَا بَنُونَ إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. The day, where wealth and children won't benefit unless someone brings a sound heart to Allah. But then what does this crowd do? They'll just kind of dismiss it. Oh, these guys are just talking about, all they talk about is this, and they don't. No, this is what the deen's about. And if you don't see that, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in an instant could fix every problem with all of the believers in this life. But the problems persist because of His wisdom. And so we can be tested, others can be tested. And part of that test is how are people's interactions with each other. So yeah, that's the simple matter. If someone is speaking about the deen, sometimes they do more harm than good. How many times here on this stream or in others have I seen, I've lost count, where someone says, I did X, Y, and Z. Is it shirk? Some guy asking me yesterday, I revived a character. He's playing some game, I don't know, probably shot someone and his teammate got shot. So he revived him. Have I committed shirk? Like, just where are you getting your understanding of shirk from if you think that's shirk? It's from people who just shouldn't be talking. And what do? They just fill people's hearts with darknesses. And, all they do, they want to, make themselves feel important by putting others down. That's not deen. Deen is going and fixing your relationship with Allah, taking yourself to account, making a tawbah when you need to make a tawbah, having nasiha, goodwill for people, not just casually just sat there mocking this person and that person. And then if you were to just look through Ihya Ulumuddin and see what Imam Ghazali is talking about, which actions are wrong, you can make a list of okay, this is a problem, and this is a problem, and this is a problem. But to them it's like, oh, it's fine. No, so what? So someone who's not, and that's the problem, people, like I said, they don't see the weight of it. So I wouldn't listen to someone like that. Do yourself a favor. La tumakkin udhunaka min za'igh. Imam Malik said, don't give your ear, don't let your ear listen to someone who's off, right? Who's deviated. Allah protect us. Allah. All right, let's see some of your questions. I don't know if I can get through them all, but let's have a quick look. Okay. What settled in the heart of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu that made him excel, and how can it settle in our hearts too? Allah. What settled in the heart of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu that made him as-Siddiq al-Akbar, the greatest of the saints after any prophet radiallahu anhu ardah wa alayhi wassalatu wassalam, was the elements of yaqeen, that which gives a person absolute certainty. So it's a knowledge that Allah gives to people who devote themselves to Him completely. Such as, for example, we have in the text of the Quran regarding Al-Khadir, there is an ikhtilaf regarding Al-Khadir. Is he a prophet or is he a wali of Allah Azza wa Jal? And many of the ulama said he's a wali of Allah. And Allah knows best, subhanahu wa ta'ala. But he said, وَعَلَّمْنَاهُ مِن لَدُنَّا عِلْمًا, and we taught him from our special presence. Not that Allah Azza wa Jal is in a place, but it's a metaphorical expression. We taught him special knowledge from us. So this is something that a deep level of knowledge that Allah grants a person who devotes himself to Him. How can we have this in our hearts? Abu Sulaiman ad-Darani radiyallahu anhu wa ardah, this early Syrian wali of Allah Azza wa Jal, he said, when people's egos get used to avoiding sins, so they do the good and they avoid the sins, jalat fil malakut, they wander, their souls. So your soul and your ego and so the scholars of the science of spirituality, tasawwuf, they have different words for the soul. One of it is nafs, another is ruh, qalb, aql, sir. There were different terms for different stages of the soul's development. So he said that when a person's ego stops committing sins, he gets used to omitting them and not doing them, it develops. And it develops up until it gets to a point, he said, Jalat fil malakut. It it wanders around in the spiritual world. We know that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when we sleep, our soul is taken. And so in that world, this is how sometimes people can see things in a dream, and then it's like in real life they see it play out. So he said their souls wander in the spiritual world, and then they come back with exquisite pieces of wisdom for the person. And so they understand these things without any alim, someone of knowledge, having imparted that knowledge to them. And it's literally that, obeying Allah and His Messenger, having your akhlaq changed to align with the akhlaq of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and living the way Allah wants, putting Allah first in your life, obeying the commands of the deen, trying to show people the akhlaq of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, be sincere, uphold your social duties and responsibilities, don't neglect your dependents, these sorts of things. Someone who does that, it will happen to them. It will happen to them. Man amila bima alima awrathahu Allahu ilma ma lam ya'lam. Whoever applies what he knows, Allah will bequeath him knowledge of what he didn't know. So that's what fell into Sayyidina Abu Bakr's heart and settled there, this deep knowledge taught to him by God. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. And we ask Allah to grant us this out of His pure generosity. Would it be correct to say that qadr can change, but it's always in line with the qada? So these two words, qada and qadr, the Ash'aris and the Maturidis, they have different definitions. We won't go into it. The qada is technically close to a judgment, and the qadr is Allah's plan that is planned out. That's closest to the Quranic usage as well. I believe that's the Maturidi usage. So can the qada and the qadr change? From Allah's perspective, they don't change, right? But from our perspective, something can be one way. You make a dua, and then Allah answers the dua and changes it to something else. So yes, they can change. So you can use the terms interchangeably as well, but it can change. La yaruddul qada'a illa du'a. The Prophet said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, nothing repels the decree except for dua. So yes, they can change, but ultimately what Allah knows, His knowledge is a different realm, and that's, He knows, because He's beyond time. Time doesn't affect Him. There's no causation in temporal causation, in His perspective. Okay. So yeah, if someone works for the ambulance as a paramedic, they may be unable to perform Juma due to the nature of the work, always being on the road. Is there an excuse here given the circumstances? There may very well be, because if their job entails, being on call to potentially respond to a life-threatening situation to someone else, then yes, it's just like we talked about the prayers last time, and when you can miss one. So this could be it. But the Jumu'ah prayer, it's very easy in the Hanafi school. You just need 4 people, the Imam, 3 others, and for someone to give a khutbah. The khutbah can just be the person standing up saying Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, sitting down, standing up, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. I mean, literally it's that. You could read the Fatiha twice over, a Fatiha and a Surah, and just sitting for 5 seconds between. The time it takes to say 3 verses, so a few seconds between. Stand up again, and then for that person or someone else even, to lead them in 2 units. Like, you could literally be done with a Jummah if you have a job like this. Find some other Muslims if you can, and you could literally be done with the Jumu'ah prayer in 5 minutes. So if you can go to a mosque and pray, excellent, do that. But if you have a situation like this, then try and arrange it. Even if you try and get some people who live near the hospital, just come help me out. I struggle, whatever. Just pray Juma with me and do that. But try and get the Juma prayer done. It has a very workable solution. It's not difficult. Okay. All right. Is it permissible to show your knees as a male to a physio for an assistant without having any known injury? Well, if there's no need, technically no. In the Hanafi school, the knees are part of the aura. If it's just for a checkup, then in the Shafi'i school, the knees are not part of the aura. So maybe if you think there's a concern, then fair enough. But in the Hanafi school, it's not. Excuse me. Is a practicing Muslim woman obliged to obey a fasiq husband? He doesn't pray and even makes fun of some tenets of Islam. She might leave him as well. However, they have had a love marriage. Okay, so a fasiq or not, the obligation to obey the husband still stands unless it's something that's going to harm her. Like he says, go and stick your head in the oven or something when it's on or something like that. Clearly, no, right? Or if he's doing something to humiliate her, like he makes her do something that's going to lead to humiliation in the family, in the street or whatever. Or if it's something that contradicts the rules of the deen, don't pray or don't cover, and he can't command her to do those things. But in general, yes, she has to obey the husband. If there is, this thing, if he's mocking the deen, that's a very serious thing, and she should, it could be very problematic, and she should go and speak to someone, family members or a local scholar, who can speak to him, get them to advise him. This isn't, it was potentially very dangerous, and it could affect the marriage, as the first answer we gave today. The obedience element, that's a longer discussion, but Allah's obligated it. There's a wisdom behind that, and rulings are generally given for everyone, and individual scenarios are covered in exceptions, and they're not covered in a general ruling. Specific scenarios that may require an exception are covered in the exceptions, but the general ruling is given for everyone, because most people would fall under that category. All right. Is a forced khula via emotional blackmail or threat of harm valid, where parent forced daughter for khula for her husband? Daughter signed a statement and the Sharia court has issued a khula. So firstly, there's a couple of issues here. Firstly, a khula is a conditional divorce in exchange of a payment, basically. So what people understand is like a lady saying, I don't want to be married to you anymore, and then the marriage being annulled. That's not a khula. A khula in the Sharia is, she says, I will give you X amount of money, you divorce me, and he has to agree to that, and then he issues a divorce and she pays him. Right? That's a khula. So so I don't think that's being done here, said here. So if they're forcing her, forced daughter for khula from her husband, daughter signed the statement. Well, so they've said either something truthful or fictional, and the Sharia council, based on that, has issued. If she signed it, that's going to stand, because she's given them a reason. I don't know if it's true or not here, but she's given them a reason, and they will have annulled the marriage. So it's not the case of the husband ending it. The Sharia council will have annulled it, and they will have seen that there's a basis for it. So, yeah. So I think you should go and speak to that Sharia council. So yeah, I'll cover the ambulance thing. Okay. If someone thought or believed that some of the people from Ya'juj and Ma'juj might be are Muslims because they're saying inshallah to make a whole, will that be belief be kufr? I don't know. From my understand that they're not going to be believers, because they're all going to end up in the hellfire. So I don't know if it's going to be a kufr, but just don't even entertain it. Why are you entertaining the question? We know from the hadith that they're going to say it, and people say God willing, they may believe in God, but are they believing in all of the tenets of Islam? Probably not. So it's an issue that's not an issue, so don't make it an issue, basically. Right? Want to check on a potential marriage proposal, if the man, what to check, how to establish that they have in fact taken their shahada. Been 5 years since he reverted, but still struggles to pray correctly. Well, in some places, like in the in Muslim countries, they get a certificate in it. And most people go and say, if he's praying, he's saying Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah in the prayer, yeah, assume he's a believer. If he's struggling to pray correctly, I would advise, if you're a practicing Muslim lady, then don't marry this man. Marry someone whose level of practice is closer to yours. There can be, a lot of complications, and what you want is someone that's going to help you, and he probably needs someone closer to his level of practice so they can grow together. And just because you have feelings for someone, it doesn't mean it's going to be good for you both. So save yourself a difficult situation. Yeah, I'd look for someone else. Can you direct research to understand the nuance of what one and cannot do with the opposite gender in a workplace setting? A book, I don't know of a book. I know of fiqh books, but I mean, the interaction with the opposite gender is, like, avoid lustful gazes, speak, about things that if you're working together, you have to discuss them, and, avoid taking the conversation to, intimate discussions or things that are inappropriate. If something, just imagine if you had, the people who pray next to you in the mosque, and the imam, if they were all sat there, what conversation would you be having, with your work colleague, with them all sat there? Have that kind of conversation, and don't go around anything else. Sometimes, like, if there's an advice scenario or something, someone's asking something that they may want to keep it private, that's a different thing. So you keep that private. But casual interaction, just minimize it. You don't need to know what type of cheese she likes or whatever. Just keep it minimal. What is the reason Allah created animals? Are they going through a test? No, I think the creation of the animals is probably for our test. And it's also a blessing for us, just seeing the beauty that Allah's created in animals. Like, people consider horses beautiful and these sorts of things, and people consider, some animals, terrorizing. Is that the word? They consider them scary. So, like, someone who sees like a big grizzly bear, or like a lion, it fills them of awe. They're all signs and reminders of Allah's ultimate power. If a husband says to his wife, "We are not together anymore," and then soon after this sentence he says the word talaq in really, really low voice to himself, to confirm to himself he divorced his wife once, does this count as issuing as a single divorce or two? If he says to confirm to himself that he divorced his wife once, yeah, it's one. So the divorce would actually occur with, "We are not together anymore." So you'd say, what does that mean? And it's the word, him whispering the word talaq, confirms that was intended as a divorce. It's a kinaya divorce. It's over. Okay, can you explain the laws of zakat very simply? Like, do you have to pay zakat? I would say that we have a short course on this, very easy to follow. Zakat simplified, or zakat made simple. Check that out. Otherwise, yeah, check that out. You'll understand it. Zakat, basically, you have a certain amount of money, the nisab amount, and you have it for, so money, cash, gold, silver, which is practically what people have, or stock, trade goods, and you have this for over 12 lunar months. After 12 lunar months, and it's remained at a certain amount, the poor have a right to it. So you pay 2.5% of that. You don't pay it with every paycheck. So don't worry about that. All right. I am traveling with my family. I try to pray all the Sunnah prayers, but my family often gets impatient and saying I'm sinning by making them wait. You may not be sinning. They say my prayer is less barakah if others have to wait for them. Even if I'm praying my fard, should I listen to them? Okay, when you're traveling, so you're going on your journey on the road, just pray the fard and pray the two sunnahs of fajr and the fard for fajr, but pray the fard of elements of the prayer, and the witr as well for isha. Leave the sunnahs. When you get to where you're going and you're more relaxed, pray the full prayer. Do that, you'll be all right. Oh, okay. I can't get through all of these. So if you've asked multiple questions, I might not answer all of them. Let's have a ruling of a Muslim baby, Muslim attending a baby shower, a child born out of wedlock, non-Muslim boss. I mean, generally, if they're celebrating the fact that he's born out of wedlock or they're not married, yeah, I would avoid it. I would generally avoid it. But what's the actual ruling? I mean, if it's not celebrating the sin of the child being born out of wedlock, and there are not going to be any other haram elements like drinking wine or anything, it could be okay. But it's not the kind of environment you want to be in, to be honest with you. How do I deal with major sin and the fear that I could die without fully repenting fully? Earlier, you suggested switch banks to get my savings account when I'm older. How do I reconcile with being accountable? Okay, make tawbah. Ask Allah for forgiveness. And I think you're overthinking it a little bit. I gave you practical advice there. Just do that. And just make a sincere, deep tawbah. Assume it's valid and carry on. Next prayer time enters when I'm in Salah. Will my prayer be Ada? If it's Dhuhr, Asr is a problem. Usually for Dhuhr and Maghrib into Isha, Isha into Fajr is fine. Fajr you need to finish before the time ends. Asr before the makruh time really. So, but the rest will be Ada. It do not become Qada. Fajr will be a problem because it'll be invalid if you're praying when the sun rises. Okay, I'm gonna have to stop here. I have a lot on and if I haven't answered, I apologize. Come back next week, and I will try and answer your questions. And I'll make dua for everyone who wanted a dua. Okay. Okay. Allah bless you all. Okay. Apologies if I didn't